Tonight on Ukraine Today, Ukrainian counteroffensive. The settlement of Ternuvate in the Zaporizhzhia region has been completely cleared of the occupiers. Ukrainian weapons abroad. The country opens exports of its defense products and places its export hubs across Europe. Peace talks. Are the United States really pushing for a peace agreement to be signed by June 2026? IOC double standards. Why is the committee against honoring Ukrainian athletes killed by Russia's war, but in favor of the Russian flag? All this and more right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, like this video and let's get started. We begin with good news from Russia's Rostov region. You might think it's about a blackout, but no. Around 6,000 Russian FPV drones have been destroyed there. Ukraine's defense forces struck an enemy drone warehouse. In the Kursk region, a command post of Russia's airborne troops was hit. And in the temporarily occupied part of the Kherson region, an ammunition depot of the occupiers was destroyed. The settlement of Ternuvate in the Zaporizhzhia region has been completely cleared of the occupiers. But this is far from all the bad news for the enemy. More details on the battlefield situation in the report.
Revenge for Kyiv and all of Ukraine. Belgorod has now officially taken up the baton of the ongoing regional blackouts.
And that is all.
The governor of Belgorod urges not to strike Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities anymore because after that, retaliatory strikes follow and the air defense can't cope with them.
According to the governor of Belgorod region, more than 500 apartment buildings in Belgorod are currently without heating. Moreover, the Luch boiler house and a number of other strategic enterprises in the Belgorod region have been put out of commission. These facilities primarily supplied the Russian military-industrial complex and accordingly the permanent bases of Russian army personnel with heat and electricity.
The defense forces are gradually and confidently striking the enemy's strategic targets. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports that the Ukrainians struck a command post of a Russian airborne forces unit in the Sudzha area of the Kursk region. Ukrainian defenders also attacked a Russian ammunition depot in the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson region. In addition, the destruction of 6,000 FPV drones and components, as well as damage to several containers with drones, has been confirmed as a result of a strike on a UAV depot in the Rostov region. In this footage, a pilot in an F-16 fighter jet epically destroys an enemy Shahed over Ukraine. The village of Ternuvate in Zaporizhzhia has been completely cleared of occupiers, according to Ukrainian soldiers.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukraine's defense forces carried out a series of successful counteroffensive actions at the junction of two regions, Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk. Two settlements have been liberated, and there is further advancement into the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine.
Russian troops are advancing in the area of Taike, Kharkiv region, according to deep state analysts.
It should be noted that in the Kharkiv region, specifically in the Kupiansk direction, Ukraine's defense forces have achieved tactical successes. The settlement of Zaporizhzhia has been deoccupied. These are significant tactical successes for our defenders. There is a noted increase in occupier activity in the Vovchansk direction.
There has also been recorded advancement in a number of settlements in the Bakhmut and Pokrovsk districts of Donetsk region. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that Europe is buying refined petroleum products made from Russian oil and is prioritizing trade over supporting Ukraine.
At the moment, there has indeed been an increase in the purchase of liquefied gas and petroleum products by several European countries, primarily France. In addition, European countries have purchased over $700 million worth of seafood from the Russian Federation. And Bessent's statement is a harsh assessment of the actions of European countries. In other words, we are talking about the actual financing by European states of the active phase of hostilities against our country.
Ukrainian intelligence officers have published information about 21 enterprises involved in the development and production of unmanned systems used by the aggressor state in the war against Ukraine. More than half of them are still not under sanctions from any of the countries in the sanctions coalition, which allows the aggressor to freely obtain technologies, components, and funding, as noted by the main intelligence directorate, CHOR.
According to Deep State, the situation on the Pokrovsk direction is deteriorating. The occupiers are pulling infantry north of Pokrovsk and conducting remote mining. On the Mirnograd direction, Russian forces are hiding in Chauch and using civilians as human shields. This is a violation of the laws and customs of war. In addition, the occupiers are disguising themselves in civilian clothing. Over the past day, Russia has lost at least 980 occupiers killed and wounded. That brings total Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,248,560. Over the last 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces also destroyed 2 Russian tanks, 5 armored combat vehicles, 33 artillery systems and dozens of other units of enemy military equipment. Sadly, we have losses as well. During a combat mission, the crew of an Mi-24 helicopter was killed. This was reported by representatives of the 11th Separate Army Aviation Brigade, Kherson. Eternal memory. The occupiers struck energy infrastructure in the Odessa region. A fire broke out at the facility. Several settlements in 3 communities were partially left without power. The Kremlin is running out of money for the war. In addition to enormous spending on maintaining the occupying army, there is another key factor: lost profits. India has decided to move closer to the United States. How could this help Kyiv? The answer in the report.
Indian oil refineries are refusing to purchase Russian oil in favor of a trade deal with the United States. The country's largest refineries have stopped buying Russian oil and are not expected to resume their purchases over the long term.
Indian oil companies Bharat Petroleum and Reliance Industries are not accepting offers from traders to load Russian oil in March and April, according to a trader who approached the refineries.
The reason for refusing Russian oil is a possible deal with the United States. The companies plan to stick to this decision going forward in order to facilitate the conclusion of a trade agreement between India and the United States. Recently, the countries announced a framework trade agreement which they plan to finalize by March. It envisions lower tariffs and deeper economic cooperation.
India is one of the targets of this ongoing global logistical and energy reshuffling. India understands that right now it is like the guest of honor at the table, that its market and its market growth are of interest to everyone. 6 months ago, I said that it would take India 2 years to free itself from dependence on Russian oil. Now, 6 months have passed, and we are already seeing some early signs that something positive is happening.
Also, on February 6th, Donald Trump signed an order canceling the additional 25% tariffs on goods from India, which had been imposed because the country was buying Russian oil. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of India stated that the reduction in purchases of Russian oil is not connected to cooperation with the United States.
Diversifying our energy sources in accordance with objective market conditions and the changing international dynamics is the foundation of our strategy to ensure energy security.
In addition, India has joined the fight against the Shadow Fleet. On Friday, the Indian Coast Guard detained 3 tankers under sanctions that were allegedly engaged in smuggling in the Arabian Sea. These tankers are transporting oil of unknown origin and concealing it.
All 3 vessels are on the U.S. Department of the Treasury sanctions list under the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, pursuant to Executive Order 13,902, and are believed to be linked to the network of sanctioned Indian national Jagwinder Singh Brar. According to the Treasury Department, Brar is a captain and ship owner who owns a fleet of about 30 vessels, many of which operate in the Iran-linked Shadow Fleet. These vessels are engaged in transferring Iranian oil from the Middle East to foreign buyers, concealing and falsifying its origin.
According to trade and industry sources in December, India's consumption of Russian oil, the world's 3rd largest oil consumer and importer, fell to its lowest level in 2 years. Currently, tankers carrying Russian oil with a total estimated volume of 140 million barrels have accumulated off the coast of India, and they may also be delayed.
The situation with falling revenues in Russia is catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. That is, Russia is now actually forced to sell gold. Russia is truly now simply forced to cut expenses. Everything indicates that these are not just empty numbers, but in fact, the trend in Russian budget revenues from oil is, catastrophic.
Before the start of the full-scale invasion, money from the sale of hydrocarbons made up half of the Russian Federation's budget. Now it's only 20%. Indian oil refineries are increasing their purchases of oil from the Middle East, Africa, and South America, while simultaneously reducing their purchases of Russian oil. And this means that there is less and less money in the aggressor's budget.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. A historic step. Ukraine opens exports of its defense products and places its export centers across Europe. Up next, how this will affect Ukraine's defense industry and the state budget.
A historic step for Ukraine. As President Volodymyr Zelensky stated, during the year 2026, 10 export centers will begin operating in European countries, which will focus on promoting and producing Ukrainian technologies. Ukraine is opening up the export of its defense products. The president also revealed some details about the geography of this cooperation.
Today we are opening up exports. It is very reassuring that exports are being opened. 10 export centers in Europe will already be operating in 2026. This includes Germany, the Baltic states and the Nordic countries. In total, 10 representatives. In 2026, they will be operating in Germany, and by mid-February, we will already see the production of our drones in Germany. I will receive the first drone. There is also a production line operating in Britain. Production lines are up and running. All of these are our Ukrainian technologies.
Now, Ukraine is essentially entering the global technological race. And this is not only about developing our own defense industry, but also increasing the sales of our technologies worldwide. Even though the country has been at war for more than 10 years.
Certain products that are currently supplied to the Ukrainian military in sufficient quantities and are not in short supply are in extremely high demand. And the surplus will be exported to stimulate domestic production. This idea has been in the making for quite some time. And it doesn't just concern, for example, drones, which are produced in large quantities in Ukraine. There are various other specific categories of weaponry, along with a wide range of additional equipment that is not currently experiencing such a high level of demand in the annual defense orders, directly by the Ministry of Defense and so on.
The export of weapons will help Ukraine cover the funding shortfall for new production. It will also help increase the country's budget. Ukrainian manufacturers have been waiting for this for a long time, as their capacities were idle due to a lack of funding. And there has long been demand for Ukrainian developments around the world. At the same time, not so long ago, the very idea of exporting Ukrainian weapons or technology seemed unthinkable, since the Ukrainian defense industry was being deliberately destroyed.
Over these 4 long and challenging years of full-scale invasion in Ukraine, our domestic military-industrial complex has evolved and expanded significantly, reaching levels far beyond anything seen in the entirety of the preceding decade. And this is very important because, in fact, from the very beginning of the modern stage of Ukraine's independence, our defense industry received little attention. Not just little attention, it was ignored, sold off, and dismantled. Practically during every term of every president, Kravchuk, Kuchma, and so on, it was complete degradation and destruction of our defense industry, especially under Yanukovych. It reached its peak then. Under Yanukovych, Ukraine's military-industrial complex, it was deliberately and simply destroyed. And only since 2014 did a gradual revival begin, with development and the return of those projects that had been relevant decades ago and their implementation. Well, for example, the same Neptune anti-ship missile system, which at one time sank the missile cruiser Moskva, and it prevented the capture of Odessa and the Odessa region.
But as the president of Ukraine noted, Ukrainian facilities in Germany are expected to be launched in the coming days. This will not only allow Ukraine to earn income, but will also help protect Europe from military aggression. After all, modern European security is impossible without Ukrainian expertise.
Today, security relations in Europe are based on our technologies and drones. That is, those who are talking about wanting the dome and so on, protection, drones. There are several different projects in Europe. All of this will be based mostly on Ukrainian technologies and Ukrainian specialists.
Ukrainian developments in the field of unmanned systems are becoming the foundation for Europe's defense. And there is a logical explanation for this.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is saying completely obvious things that are well understood even within Europe itself. They do not possess it. The knowledge base and experience that, for example, Ukraine has when it comes to countering a country like the Russian Federation. And for instance, a raid of 19 foam-based Herbier drones into the airspace. Recent events in the territory of Poland at one time clearly showed that the entire Polish air defense system is absolutely and completely unprepared for such sudden aerial raids. If these types of raids were to happen every single night, the current Polish air defense system would likely wear itself out entirely in less than a month's time. Basically, Europe is not ready for a war with the Russian Federation. They do not fully comprehend or appreciate all the various complex aspects necessary to realize exactly what specific strategic tools and methodologies need to be used for more effective counteraction to the ongoing and evolving threat posed by Russia. And Ukraine, of course, in this particular case, can significantly help Europe in a much more comprehensive way, both technically, technologically, and with its experience.
Putin has repeatedly said that he wants the demilitarization of Ukraine. This point was one of the reasons why Putin attacked Ukraine. But once again, things did not go according to his plan. And now Ukrainian technologies are in demand not only in Europe, but all over the world.
Significant international defense and security events are expected this week. This was stated by President Zelensky. According to him, Ukraine's position will be presented clearly in both Europe and the United States.
In fact, almost every day now our negotiating team is working on the documents, on the proposals that can deliver results at the next meetings. And the key thing is that our partners are as committed as we are in Ukraine. Peace is needed. Reliable security guarantees are the only real foundation for peace to exist, and for Russians not to break agreements with one strike or another, with one or another of their hybrid operations. There are no countries left in Europe that do not yet know what Russian interference is, or what Russian destabilization operations can look like. Everyone sees what Russian killers do, what Russian missiles do, what Russian drones do. Protection from this and real security guarantees must be tangible and must lay the groundwork for a lasting peace.
Meanwhile, the US ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, denied reports about a clear deadline, specifically by June, for reaching a peace agreement. This is reported by The Guardian. According to Whitaker, Washington has not set any specific time limits. Up next, what is really happening behind the scenes of the peace talks?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin need to hold a face-to-face meeting to agree on the most difficult issues of the peace agreement.
Of the 20-point peace plan that formed the basis of the recent trilateral negotiations, some issues remain unresolved. Only a few points remain. These are the most delicate and complex issues that need to be resolved at the leaders' level.
In fact, this is the final stage when technical agreements already exist, but a political decision has not yet been made. And it is precisely now, according to Ukrainian diplomats, that the very window of opportunity has appeared, which could either lead to real peace or close for an indefinite period. After all, the negotiating momentum currently being driven by the United States could weaken as early as this fall with the start of the US midterm elections. In
the first place, this is a signal to the American president personally and accordingly to his administration. It is essentially about the fact that if all the necessary conditions are created, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is not opposed to a personal meeting with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin.
The main stumbling block in the negotiations remains the territorial issue. Russia demands control over the entire Donetsk region. For Kiev, this is unacceptable. According to Reuters, the Ukrainian side is open to discussing technical formats, demilitarized zones, or economic mechanisms, but not the transfer of territory. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant remains a separate sticking point. The Kremlin rejected the US proposal for international management of the facility and insists on its own control, offering Ukraine only access to electricity. For Kyiv, this would mean the de facto legalization of the occupation, and therefore such a scenario is rejected. Even if interim agreements are reached, there remains one more crucial factor: the Ukrainian public. According to Reuters sources, any territorial concessions put to a referendum would most likely be rejected by voters. In
the end, the war is ongoing now, and the bargaining, or rather, the negotiations are not about territory, not just about control over Ukraine's future. At this very moment, it's about the status of the victor in this war. Who will manage to claim this proud status for themselves? In other words, Putin doesn't just want 20% of Donetsk region's territory, but a loud declaration that he has won, protected the mythical people of Donbass, saved Russians in Ukraine, and influenced denazification.
At the same time, the United States has proposed a new round of trilateral negotiations to end the Russian-Ukrainian war. The negotiating teams of the two countries are to meet on U.S. soil in Miami within the next week. Thus, negotiations that once seemed to leave almost no room for maneuver are becoming a platform where Ukraine shapes the agenda. Against the backdrop of war, pressure from allies, Western expectations, and Moscow's constant attempts to impose its narratives, Kyiv has remained consistently firm. They are defending their own interests.
And finally, about the double standards of the International Olympic Committee. The IOC banned the Ukrainian skeleton athlete Vladislav Hroskevich from competing in a helmet showing images of Ukrainian athletes killed by Russia's war. But, and this is a very big but, an Italian snowboarder competed wearing a helmet that included, among other flags, the Russian one. For some reason, this incident did not trigger any reaction from the organizing committee. Maybe someone there has forgotten why Russian athletes were banned in the first place. So let me remind them. Russia launched a war against Ukraine. Civilians are being killed, athletes among them. Cities are being destroyed. Russian tricolor has become a symbol of state-level terrorism. So if the Olympic Charter requires neutrality of equipment, including freedom from political or other messages during competitions, then the Russian flag definitely has no place there. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and see you next time.